A Supermarket in California by Allen Ginsberg. We're going to discuss it today.
Where do you shop? That's the
Not in
important question.
California.
What is your supermarket of choice, Una?
I live in the Midwest, so we're kind of a Kroger family here because Kroger drove out of business all the other supermarkets in our town.
I'm a Publix guy.
This is it's kind of a weird poem, don't you think? Like the way it kind of floated between, I thought, reality and this man's imagination, that it was nice to not be grounded, but I can see it kind of being maybe frustrating for some people.
I was definitely confused at times. I tried to put myself in this position. I'm walking around Publix and I start seeing people, and I guess I don't have the imagination like Ginsburg did. I sometimes make up stories about people. I'll see a couple and, I might hear some conversation like, oh, they're fighting, I wonder what they're fighting about. Or, I'll see a dad scolding their kid or a mom yelling at their children or something or shushing their baby. And so I come up with these like narratives in my head about how their life might be going, but mine never goes to this fantastical world of interpretation. So that was very unique, and I did struggle with some parts of the poem.
I don't think you're too far removed from it. I mean, if we look at it just from some of the lines, like I thought we would discuss this, but it says, "Where are we going, Walt Whitman? The doors close in an hour. Which way does your beard point tonight?" So, I mean, first you got to say, who is Walt Whitman? He's an American poet. And essayist from, late 1890s or so. I think he died around then. And then you have Allen Ginsberg, who was born in like 1926, right? So these are two American men that had no chance of meeting. Like they were never alive at the same time. Yet maybe Allen Ginsberg, the speaker of this poem, I should say, feels like he gets to have this conversation on some level with Walt Whitman.
Do you think that as he's walking around, he saw a guy with a giant beard, and that was kind of the inspiration of, hey, that guy looks like Walt Whitman, and that was one of the things that led off to this, because there is a lot of almost illusionary language to the poem.
Absolutely, because you could take it as like inspiration on some level, you know what I mean? Like, Walt Whitman, where are we going? When I read your poems, it inspires me, right? We go to some other world. It's exciting. You always have these creative things. But I mean, on some level, you can almost read it like kind of pessimistically. Like this is like very existential of like, well, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? Like, like the tomatoes, the cabbage. Look at these neon fruits. Like it's just very like made up and done. It makes me feel like I'm in Hollywood. Like, come on, Walt. Like we didn't have it as good as you had it back then.
I also thought of it. You could also see it as like an adventure. Like if you made the choice of going into the grocery store, you were in the supermarket, and you decided, I'm only gonna buy what other people buy. Or I'm going to follow this person around, and when they pick something off the shelf, I'll grab something off the shelf. And so it's almost like Whitman is his guide to traverse the dangers of the supermarket.
Well, and to that point, why let someone else choose for you, right? If we do take it like that pessimistic, like existentialist way, like what's the point of all of this? Like they say, when it comes to defining your own purpose and making your own choices, that can be dizzying. It can be terrifying, right? Like the idea of being free to make your own choice is actually, it can make you feel like you're standing on the edge of a cliff, to quote some existentialists, right? So when we look at like, what are these products and how they shape our lives? Well, maybe there's a lot more choices. Like there's like a good angle to it, right? Because good being, well, with more options and more products, well, maybe you have more jobs. Maybe you have more spending money, essentially. You've got greater awareness of expression, right? Like you've heard like artists talk about like, well, this part makes me feel good. Like this is the way I like to express myself. Like those options can be good. But at the same time, those products, well, there's a negative way of viewing those too, right? There's we're all the same, right? Like we're we're trashing the planet with our consumerism. We are over consuming, and we all buy the same products, so we all act the same, and it creates this anxiety that you have to feel like you have to keep up with the Joneses. So even like all these products and like diversity of it now, as opposed to during Walt Whitman's time, it can be viewed positively or negatively too.
Yeah, and when you go to the grocery store, there's a lot of stimulation, right? That you have the neon lights, you have the smells. They might be giving samples out, so you're getting tastes as well. You have all these visual cues. There's a lot going on. You could be overstimulated, and I know for me, when I'm there, I always have a list, right? My wife and I make a list of what we're gonna buy, so we know that we have the things we want for the following week or 2 weeks. And I almost feel like his list isn't things he's going to buy. His list are almost like experiences that he wants to have to kind of, follow what you were saying.
What do you think? I don't know whether to ask this question as what does he want from the products? Which experience does he want? Or what does he want from Walt Whitman? Because, he touches the book. He wants to feel inspired. There's even like that quote in the beginning where it said like, in my hungry fatigue and shopping for images, I went into the neon fruit supermarket, dreaming of your enumerations, right? So he says he's shopping for images. Like, did you take that as he was an artist trying to be inspired as well? Do you feel he's down on his luck and is looking for some form of happiness in his life, like this empty dread that he might have?
For sure. I think that we've done many stories in poetry where the mundane becomes magical because of a muse, where somebody's sitting in the park or going to the library or walking around a city. And these things can inspire people that have these incredible writing abilities and imagination. And I think that Ginsburg has done the same thing here of a mundane task that a lot of people dread doing. You're spending lots of money. It's boring. It takes time out of your day. You might have to fight people for a cart, or they might not have the item you want. And I think that finding such inspiration in something that is so bland, pun intended, is something that is incredible.
Do you think this speaker, like, where is he viewing himself compared to like the Walt Whitman? And maybe Walt Whitman is just like you said, a muse of sort. Like, this represents the past, right? And there's even that quote, like, what America did you have? So it's like this question of like, what's different now versus then? Do you think he's romanticizing the past? Do you think, since he is dreaming of images, and maybe he's an artist trying to create something, if he lives the same life as one of these people that did get inspired and created amazing poetry like Walt Whitman, how does he come to the same conclusion? If you remember, we read that Jorge Luis Borges story, Don Quixote, where a guy loves Cervantes, like the book, Cervantes, the author, Don Quixote, so much. He's like, how do I live like Cervantes lived? If I could just have the same experiences, I don't want to recreate Don Quixote. I want to come to the same conclusion as Don Quixote. So, a lot of times in poetry, they say copy, 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 right? Like, how do you come to the same conclusion and use the same techniques to be inspired and ultimately create like this great product of art?
I think that's what all great authors are trying to do, is a decent job of replicating their favorites and what has inspired them. And I think that for Ginsburg, he's looking at the past for inspiration. I think he's thinking of what was America like then? What is it compared to my America now? How would Walt Whitman view this? Somebody that is so legendary, even at that point in time, probably not even considered a classic yet, still relatively fresh and new. I mean, only 30 years apart. How do I transcend to that level? And I think that as you walk around, doing something so simple, inspiration can hit you anywhere. And obviously it did for him. We're talking about this, poem, decades later, of what it can mean to be inspired by the past.
It also makes you question how, all right, so let's flip it. You have those things that look into the future, right? Like movie Back to the Future, right? it's kind of funny to see what they have right and what they have wrong. And it's kind of interesting, like the hoverboards, the flying cars, we're obviously not there yet, and that time's passed, right? From
Dang
the movie. Well, but you have, I'm going to say this, we still have waiters on some level to come take your order, but then a lot of times you just check out right there, like on a little kiosk now, like in today's age. And I've always kind of wondered, like, when's the server go away? Because you could totally just put in your order on an iPad. Because if you remember when they're in the future, you had like that host that was like a TV screen, digital AI bot that basically like would like replace a person working there. Like, when are we going to see more and more of that, particularly like in low skilled jobs, such as like, you know, I guess certain greeting jobs or certain waiting jobs per se. Like some of those could be replaced with technology, but we haven't yet. So it's like, here's something that we got kind of right about the future. I wonder now, to your point about looking back at the past, like, oh, what America did they have then? And I'll bet you, you know, they just had it great where they could just focus on their writing and didn't have all the distractions today. It makes me also wonder, how many things do we have wrong about the past? Right? When we romanticize and dream about how great and how wonderful, and we'll never have the books or the music will never be the same when I was a teenager because, you know, of XYZ. Like there's so many things that we probably have wrong looking and romanticizing the past too.
100% correct. I'm sure as he's creating his image of what a supermarket was, because he has to be comparing in his head, right? At least that's what I would do, because the whole time I'm reading the poem, I'm thinking, all right, I'm comparing Publix to the grocery store, the supermarket that he's in. And again, I'm on the other side of the country, so there's obviously some differences there. But, you know, self-checkout, that didn't exist. You know, that would be mind-boggling to somebody, you know, from the 1950s of not having a person, you know, do everything for you and walk your stuff out to the car. You can walk in and not even talk to a human being in the supermarket now. So I guess there's always going to be some level of comparison, right? And we only know the past through what was given to us because we never experienced it ourselves. And I bet Ginsburg probably has things wrong as well. Supermarkets were probably very different in the 1800s than they were, you know, in his life in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. Things are going to be different. And that's okay, I think, because it can lead to just that inspiration, that spark that's going to give you the context, enough context to write your great poem.
Yeah, that's true. And this did come out, what, is this 56?
Yes.
Okay, so a 56 supermarket, honestly, to your point, like they don't really talk about the checkout per se. Like you could almost, you know, the tomatoes, the watermelons, like there's certain elements of this that haven't changed, which I think is kind of interesting too. You know, 70 years is a long time. Longer, about the same amount of time, actually, from when Ginsburg wrote this and when Walt Whitman died, right? So we're the exact same time now reviewing and reacting to this poem, which honestly, it could be modern. It could be nothing's changed on some levels to when Ginsburg wrote this and look back on some of the later years of Walt Whitman.
Yeah. I mean, Apple Pay and self-checkout. I mean, other than that, everything's in rows. You have carts, you have a bag boy, you know, you have the neon lights. I mean, a lot, you have probably a produce section. I mean, a lot is going to look 90% similar. Yeah. Which is crazy to think. I mean, the products on the shelves are going to be different, but I mean, they're still cereal. They, you know, they probably just don't have, you know, cookies.
Okay.
What is it?
Let's time capsule this, right?
Okay.
So it's 2024 right now. If this video survives for, let's say, 10 years. So if it is 2034 and you're out there watching it, something that just recently came out that I think is kind of interesting is now you can take items, like particularly like at sporting events and stuff like that. You swipe your credit card to get into like this little store area. And when you walk out, it just charges your card. You don't scan anything. You don't show anyone what you bought. Like smart cameras all around know what you've purchased. And I think that's incredible. So today at the grocery store, you still got to like scan the code. You still got to either go to a person or do the self-checkout. What's it like in 2034? Like, are we just checking out things on our phone? Do we just pick it up and it just cameras can recognize who's picking it up and knows who to charge it to? But that's my time capsule request right now for 2034.
I would predict that grocery stores are very small and everything is just shipped right to you. Everything like Uber Eats or something. Yeah, everything is just sent right to your house via drone or something, or teleported in.
Well, that's a common like manufacturing thing now is made to order, right? Like they don't make a product until you order it, because then they don't have to deal with as much like warehouse, storage, pick, pack, ship. They just have to deal with like the make, ship essentially. So yeah, that's a good point. Like is the model completely changing? I don't know. There's something about holding something in your hands. Like I can't see brick and mortar. I see it going away, but it's hard to see it just completely disappearing.
Yeah, tell that to all the malls out there.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you for spending time with us today. If obviously you're going to be in the future no matter what for when this video goes out. Hopefully, if it's been a couple years, let us know what are some of the big advancements that you've been interested in over the last few years. My name's been Una. Peace out.
Peace.